Welcome, Drink with James, episode 124. We have, as I called her at the conference, and I wasn't even drinking at the time, the high priestess of the influencer world here, Tezza and Cole. It is a two-part team, and this is really the first time we have had the full team. This isn't the full team, but where we've brought, so much of what y'all do is the vision and the photography, and I wanted Cole to be here to be able to talk about that. And all y'all out here that are trying to convince your boyfriends or husbands or wives or girlfriends to shoot for you, plop them down. You're about to go to school here. So thank you all for coming.
No, thanks for having us. Yeah.
Let's just start with the very basics of how y'all came to be sitting here, how you came to have the life that you do. How'd you get into this?
Where to begin? Okay, I guess I'll start there. We met as babies, real life.
Yeah.
Like we
Literal
were crawling
babies.
Her mom
in diapers.
threw my baby shower.
Yeah, we go all the way back. So, we were just like family friends our whole life. And then, kind of later in the college years, we started hanging out more. He actually played in my band at the time.
This also sounds like an amazing sitcom. Like Tezza and Cole, the college years.
Awkward weirdos. Really cute. So we did that whole thing, and then we kind of started dating, and I was a photographer for years at this point, and so I was always posting and like creating weird things on my own. And I think, I was kind of like, let's get you into the art world, because he came from a way different side of things, which I'll let you speak to. But so, at first it was just like way fun and experimental, and he would come on photo shoots, or we'd just create random things for fun or for like my band and stuff at the time. And then to speed things up, we got married. Woohoo. And we moved to New York, I think a little over 2.5 years ago.
Yep.
And that's
exactly 1 year after marriage, we were like, we're out of here.
We're out of here.
Yeah.
From Utah, yeah.
You're from Utah, yeah.
And that's kind of when we moved here, I realized like, there's a career in this, Before it was kind of just for fun, and we loved doing it. So then we kind of started getting into the industry and meeting people, and he had a full-time job when we first moved here, which was like super stressful and really hard to find time to like work together.
What were you doing at the time?
I was doing app development.
Okay.
So I was working for a healthcare startup out of Utah. They were super cool to let me work remote. So that was sweet. Yeah, they let us come out here, and I was kind of doing both things at once. It was crazy.
And had you always been interested in photography, or?
Not necessarily. Not really. I mean, I've always been interested in arts and creativity and stuff like that. And I got into computer science and programming for that reason. I was very much like a student of Steve Jobs and loved the intersection of the arts and technology, and so I was always into it, but never in this medium, just doing different things. So when we started doing it together, it was like the best thing.
So how did you? I mean, obviously you've been interested in photography for most of your adult life, right? And pre-adult life probably as well. So you had all these So you had all these chops as a photographer. How did you? I think most people watching this, they're either looking for a photographer to work with, or they have a girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband at home that they're thinking maybe I could take my photos. Cole, you've obviously gotten to a level now that is like pretty fairly impressive as a photographer. How hard was it for you, Tezza, to transfer what you knew and loved about photography to Cole, and how much did it feel like you were training someone to get what you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, when I first started, I was having, the same thing that other people are doing, like my friends, my little brother. I was trying to train everyone how to see what I was seeing. And when we first started working together, it was hard at first. And I admit that because I think people sometimes give up too quickly. But when we first started, like, when we found something that was clicking, I think I realized, oh, I have to let him kind of find his creative journey and let his vision come to life too. And so we kind of had to find a balance between like, okay, this is how I see it and how I want you to do it, and like I had to let him also do what he was saying, because like, you know, when you're a creative, you think, oh my gosh, this is what I want. This is, you know, it's really hard to like let that go. But that when I first started doing that, I think that's when we kind of found our rhythm.
Totally, yeah.
And I mean, even that though took, I think, like a full year
It
of
did,
like
yeah. So
trying
much
things
trial
out.
and error.
And in
yeah.
the beginning, were you like, you know, I mean, you guys seemingly have a great relationship. You know, it could be a total nightmare. I don't know. I mean, but it seems you guys
We're
seem to
lucky.
legitimately really, you know, really be happy. And like, there is that like, you know, I can see then like you just being like, yeah, you want me to do this? Like, I'll do this. But
Yeah.
like, was it weird for you in the beginning? You know, you're a developer. You know, developers are high in demand, make good money. You can also like sit back and create something out of nothing. I think photography is fairly similar, right? There's nothing exists and then something exists, which is similar to development. But like, how hard was that mentally for you to like get into it? To be like, no, you know, because I think the problem with most people working with their significant other is getting the passion for like being like, I really legitimately want. Because I just want to stress again, obviously, like that you're not just like carrying a camera around. You're like legitimately a great photographer. Like, you know, so like that's a transition that is rare in the space. So was it hard?
Admittedly, it wasn't hard because I think it comes from the same place that my love for developing and programming comes from, is creating something out of nothing, and that was why I got into that in the first place, was just my love for creation. So just being able to practice in a different medium and learn a lot from Tezza and figure it all out, it was fun. It was a fun challenge, and I loved it. Yeah, so it wasn't really hard to like passionately get into it. It was hard to learn, for sure. Yeah. It took a long time to learn, and it was frustrating, you know, and at times you feel like you want to give up or it's too hard, but I loved it from the get-go. Yeah.
And I think like some of the first shoots we were doing back in the day, we would like create these like sets. We would do nuts things. So we would put so much time into the beforehand. Oh my gosh, like if I could pull up images.
We got like 100 vintage fabrics and like built a tent for our backyard.
Yeah, like
and,
we were like
made this
sewing and
we
like
do all this crazy stuff. Yeah, so.
It was like so fun, but I think so it felt like, you know, we were creating something before we even took the picture together, so it wasn't just like, come shoot photos of me, like, you know, so it kind of felt like more of a team thing anyway, but.
So, you know, I'm interested in those early shoots, the difficulties you were having, just because I think for anyone getting their picture taken, working with any photographer, whether you're in a relationship or not, there is a breaking in period of like, what do I like, what don't I like, and how do I balance this photographer's vision with my vision? And at the end of the day, it's, you know, your feed.
Totally.
So like you kind of have to say what you want, but you are working with this. So like how did, you know, I'd love to hear a little more about that, because I think a lot of people probably feel like I'm not getting out of my photographer what I want.
Right.
And, you know, Tezza, from your side, like, I don't know how to communicate what I want. So interested to know, like, how did you communicate what was wrong? And then Cole, from your side, like, how did you, you know, push back, and how did you guys kind of push each other to the place you are now?
Yeah.
Well, I'll speak first to things I did that were wrong and still do. It's a really hard battle. I think, you know, as a person, and I know this from being a photographer, but like when you're on the photography side of things, you see something as a composition and you're like, this is beautiful. But like when it's the person, they like something, for some reason people like something about themselves in a photo and you can never quite nail it. Like even as a photographer, it was really frustrating for me when somebody wouldn't like a photo that I'm like, no, this is amazing, you know? And so in the beginning, and even still, he would like show me this picture and I'd be like, ew, like, no.
And I would think it was awesome.
And that's when we would just be like, oh my gosh, like he would just be like, oh, you're so like difficult, you know? And I'm like, I know, but like, so it took me being like, love the idea, but, you know, let's try something like this. This is why I'm like it. And I think like, even still to this day, something like that we found works for us is like, we shoot a lot of images. Like we don't Sometimes it ends up being the first one, luckily.
Yeah.
But we kind of like shoot around. We like find things that are working, and then we're like, okay, that's what's working. Now let's work on that exact thing again.
Yeah.
Because I think that is kind of how we master getting like that one shot. Back in the day, it was like for multiple shots, and so that was kind of a different rhythm, I think. But now that we like focus on getting like one thing that's gonna like do really well and get someone's attention, I think that's more of a focus. But
Totally.
I'll let you speak more to.
Yeah, well, totally. Accepting like the give or take and compromising was a huge thing, trying to not be stubborn and like open to the other person's ideas. And like Tezza said, we shoot a ton. And so much of it is like, I'll have an idea that I'm really passionate about and she will. And so we'll let each other try different things, and that often sparks something in the middle that ends up kind of being the shot, So yeah, and then a lot of too in the learning experience, the initial part was kind of recreating shots that I've seen of Tezza or that Tezza had taken of other people, just to understand the way she sees through a camera and the way she wants to be shot, and different ways to compose things in different perspectives. So a lot of it was just trying to recreate things that I've seen in the past to learn by doing, a ton of trial and error. That was probably the most helpful thing.
Yeah. I moonlighted as a photographer for a few years back in the day, and same thing. I would just copy. I was just like, I'd see something, I'd be like, let's see if I can do that. You know, and I think for influencers, I think, you guys are both so supportive of the community you've built around yourself, which most people can't say that they've actually built an actual community, but I think you have, and you teaching your audience how to do what you do, you're essentially giving it away, being like, you guys do it. You have a new book out, which is amazing, and it's like, it's a literal fucking textbook. Like it's an actual, like it is like a textbook on how to do what you do. Most people wouldn't be confident enough to just like give that information away. But that openness, for you two, makes this work creatively, that you're both just like, let's get better together. Let's like do this,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And like for me, there are so many photographers back in the day I used to like take workshops from and do all of that, and they seemed so willing to give up information. And at first I'm like, oh my gosh, that little thing changed my whole world. But I never like ended up being like that photographer, but it just like incorporated into my work. And I think like sometimes it's hard when you give up so many tricks and then you see things and you're like, oh my gosh, I told you to do that, and here you are doing it, and you're killing it better than me. And it's like frustrating, but it's motivating. I think it pushes us to like constantly be like, okay, we gotta step it up. What are we gonna do next? How can we improve? And I think that's kind of what it's all about for us.
For sure. And just, the creative community around it and trying to inspire this community of creators is like the most rewarding thing ever. It's so fun to see someone get the book in the mail and then send us a photo or something they learned from the book and then actually implement it. It's like the coolest, most rewarding thing ever. And I think we get so much reward and fulfillment out of actually creating and trying to figure all this stuff out, and improving ourselves. So being able to share that with other people and see them get equally as stoked about it is the best. It's kind of the mission behind everything.
I think it's kind of why we do it. Yeah.
Speaking of doing what you do and why you do it, the trend over the last few years has been to like authenticity, real life. Give me something real. People have been moving away from editorial imagery. I talk about you guys ad nauseum on the show just because like the growth is so rare. What you guys have experienced over the last few years. I think I went to lunch with an influencer maybe a year and a half ago, and I'd always ask people, who are you following? Who should I be following them? Not. And he's like, oh, if you need to follow Tezza, like she's like, a goddess, and everything she does is like perfect. And I was like, okay. So that's when I started following you. 18 months ago, I think you were like 200K or so, 250. And now it's six something. So like that growth is very rare right now, especially for people essentially creating art. So like, did you have a time when you weren't growing? Did you ever think about like moving away from highly editorial imagery into more like in the moment, the more in the moment stuff that was quote unquote doing well?
Yeah, definitely. I think, okay, you know, we kind of, when we first moved here, it was like trial and error, right? Like we were just doing stuff, whatever, like we could come up with. I think we've always leaned toward the editorial side because that's kind of the background I came from. So at one point, I kind of felt like we were actually doing more lifestyle imagery. And that's kind of what started the momentum for us, because most people I was around were trying to be like models or something like you know, doing way like street style. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to be way more approachable like that, and that's who I am. And so it kind of felt like that, and then all of a sudden that became a trend, and I was like, oh, like I felt like I was just seeing my own photos once again. So I was like, okay, I have to like keep adapting, and I think I've like kept, you know, it's like we kind of keep that theme, but we also, I was like, what I can do best is this editorial like art vibe. That's like where we came from, that's what we're good at, so like let's kind of push back into that. And we kind of noticed, you know, a change there. I think when it's a job and you have to get hired by brands to make money, that's when you start to question what you're doing the most. Because there have been times where we're like killing it, but we feel like we're failing on the job side. And that's a weird dynamic and really stressful. And I have many friends that are like, you need to just change what you're doing and be like, just stand on a corner in your outfit. That's how you're gonna get hired for this job. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like everything I've built for nothing. But you know, we actually just were like, no, we're not gonna do it, even though it would be way easier. Sometimes I think we set ourselves up for like the hardest thing ever, and we're like, I can't think of another idea. Like, why did we do this? But like those days we're like, whatever, let's just be simple and like we don't have to do something crazy every day. Like that's impossible, and people get burnt out, and that's something to also recognize. So I think it's like finding a balance between that and I mean, I don't know if there's something you want to say towards that, but I think it's, I mean, even still today, like it's something that I struggle with, like balancing shooting for me and working on our brand, and then also wanting other brands to hire us for what we're doing.
And you know, speaking about brand work, obviously you have such an aesthetic, and the lane is, to your point, is not as big, right? Like you guys can kind of play in this space, and because you are pretty protective over your brand, you know, it's not worth the one deal to go do something that doesn't feel right, which I think is so smart. But how much, when a brand comes to you, are you then stepping back and saying, okay, this is how we can make this work? You know, let's pull a real world example out. I took some screenshots here, and Tim will put this up on the screen when it's actually live. But this Tresemme one recently, you know, which is, you know, it's tough. You know, a hair campaign for you, like you have great hair. Obviously, like your hair is very much a part of your look, so it totally makes the partnership makes total sense that Tresemme wants to work with you guys. How do you create editorial imagery for a brand like that? You know, you've done it, but like, are you pitching them the idea beforehand, or are you just shooting it? Kind of talk to me through the brand process.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. Sometimes, like even Tresemme, because that's been a partnership that's been really long. And in the beginning, we didn't butt heads, but it was like, I was trying to do my thing, they wanted their thing. And then finally we kind of found this middle ground where I understood exactly what they were looking for, but how to do it in my way still. I think a lot of times it's like, well.
A lot of it is having a conversation with the brand, and a lot of it too is finding the right brand that wants to have like a partnership or relationship with you. Like Tresemme, we've worked with for a while, and so like Tessa said, I think we've learned a lot from each other to the point where now we have this middle ground where we know what they're looking for, but we also know how we can put our own twist on it, where it's going to work for both parties. So like that image, for example, you know, they wanted a cool, clean bathroom shot, but then we wanted to utilize the mirror to create this weird, like double twin perspective thing. So it was cool. We worked a lot to try and get that perspective, but it also fit what Trust Me was looking for. So a lot of it was just having those conversations and just learning over time. Yeah.
And you guys have now taken, your business essentially in-house. You're running it yourself. How, when a brand comes to you, are you having a conversation up front being like, we do our thing, just like, are you setting the rules of kind of like the rules of engagement of like, this is how we work? Do you have that process where you say, okay, y'all, like, you're not a normal, you guys, it's not a normal influencer. It's not a normal sponsored post. So like, do you have to teach them that? Do you have to say, this is how it's going to work for you?
I think a lot of times, like, even with Trust Me, like, we've pitched ideas. Like, we're like, okay, this is what we think would be cool and like why, and it'll get better engagement because this is how that's what we do, and a lot of brands are more acceptable of that than I thought in the beginning. There are certain jobs we definitely like don't take because we just realize that's not going to work for us. Like, we don't shoot at events unless we know exactly the layout and we're going to have time to like come up with something there or stuff like that.
Is that hard? I mean, being like, we don't shoot in events.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, especially when you see money, you're like, oh my gosh, like, okay.
And initially we did, when we first moved here, and then after a few we're like, we just can't.
It's not worth it.
It's just not. It just hurts,
And I feel like I let my like community down. When I'm like, I feel like they're like, okay, that's not you, And even though, I mean, I do go to events, I love events, but it's like, that's not my story and my message that I'm trying to share. And so sometimes you find a compromise like, oh, I can do stories, and that's like, you're still working with the brand and creating that community as well. But
exactly, yeah, that's a good compromise. Is okay, we'll create a post outside of the event, but we'll do some cool stories while we're there. Figure out ways.
Or
to
like
work
on our
around
way there to talk about the event,
and
then we'll cover it. So we find a lot of compromises.
How do you, if I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, like, I want to get more creative with my work, with my brand work specifically. Do you find that it's best to say, brand gives you a brief and you say, yep, like I hear that, here's what I want to do, or do you just shoot it and show it to them? Like, have you tried both? Because I would think sometimes you're shooting something and you have an idea and you say, oh, this would be really cool. Yeah. And you shoot that and maybe the brand says, no, that's not going to work at all. Like, how often does that happen? How important is it to try and push yourself to come up with the idea and get it approved before you shoot it? I'm interested to hear.
Yeah, what do you?
Well, I think it's a mix because if it's a brand we've worked with a lot that we know how they accept things, then we'll, like sometimes it's like we're going to pitch it before because we put too much time into things. When they don't get approved, it's like a dagger because you're like, I love this so much and I know it would do well, but like the brand just for some reason doesn't approve it, and that is so frustrating. But one thing I realized being our own brand and having our own products, I think, like you have expectations, and like when someone does something kind of weird, you're like bummed. Yeah. And so that happened to me once with our own products, I was like, oh, I should be more respectful to understanding like a brand's perspective. And so, I really am careful of like, if I am going to do something crazy cool or crazy weird for us, making sure that does align with the brand. Yeah. And sometimes it's something that's going to perform well on our channel, but not for them. And if it's not for their channel either, then we'll go for, we really do push to do something that's going to like kill it on our channel. For sure. But it is a hard balance. I think that's something we still are like working on every day, trying to figure out the right way to go about that. But I will say like something cool that's happened to us is we've kind of like not reversed, but come full circle. Like a lot of brands now hire us to do shoots for them that we're not even in. Right. So we're like creative directing and like doing like shooting lookbooks. What was that one you all did with the pickup truck? And it was for Ash shoots. Yeah. That was fun. Yeah. And a lot of it we don't even like get to post, or we don't even get to talk about what. But like it's that's something I think that like people understand like our vision and like where we're coming from. So that's like another side of work, which is sometimes nice because I don't always want to be in the picture. Cole's question for you.
how, how much ownership do you feel over the business?
Mm-hmm.
You guys do so much more than just the Instagram account.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the app, which you've
Mm-hmm.
built from the ground up, which is
Yeah.
amazing. You've got the book, you've got the collage kits,
Mm-hmm.
you've got, presets.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, I'm sure there's other things.
Yeah.
There's probably like a Tezza sock line that I don't know about,
It's coming.
It's coming.
We actually work on a sock line.
So you guys, you do a lot.
Yeah.
How much ownership do you feel over the business? How is y'all's, how do you manage your personal and work relationship?
Yeah.
How does that all kind of work out?
Yeah, good question. I feel a lot of ownership over the business. I feel like we head up 2 divisions in the same company almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Tessa does her thing, I do mine thing, and I have my responsibilities and I know what my day-to-day to-do list is, and she has hers, and we report to each other very much like we would if we worked for a company. So I kind of own or work on all of our product stuff pretty much, like collage kit fulfillment and manufacturing and distribution, all that stuff, and app development and running the website, and managing the presets and making sure those are all being distributed, and downloaded like they should. And then we come together on creative direction and coming up with concepts for shoots. So yeah, I feel a ton of ownership over it. I know I'm a little more behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
It's good.
And how, Tessa, how is that for you? Are you someone that's like, has wanted the spotlight and are comfortable there? Do you feel ever like a sense of, I think you do a good job of talking about your relationship and talking
Mm-hmm.
about your, what you're bringing to the business as well. Do you ever feel like any guilt of like, oh, this isn't just me, everyone's like throwing adoration at me?
Yeah, like especially when we go to like events and things like that, it's like, and he's with me. Like I always do try and like be like, but it is also like at first it was actually hard for me because, and I'm not saying you don't deserve it now, I promise you. But like, I went to school for photography, and the people were like, "Oh my gosh, Cole's this amazing photographer."
People
And I'm
thought
like,
she had no background in photography.
I edit everything, and I was a photographer. Like people don't believe me. They're like, "But Cole like taught you," and I'm like, "No." Like
I was like, I learned from Tess, but everyone thought it was the other way around. So, it was funny.
frustrating. But like, no, now we're clear on that. But I think like working together as a couple, we're literally together 24/7. We also live in a box.
Yeah.
So that part of the relationship is interesting. It has been, luckily, like, we're somehow good at it, but it definitely has its challenges. And, we go to dinner and we're like, okay, let's, like, talk about not work, but we love to talk about it.
Does that work?
So it doesn't ever work. Like, I actually think our best conversations are, like, every dinner, every night. I'm always like, I should just press record on my phone because we're, like, just coming up with so many ideas.
Yeah.
So we love it. I think we're lucky, we try and like take a step back sometimes, but it's just, we like it. It's also, it's like it's a hobby and a job because we love what we're doing.
For sure. But there are times where we're like, we just need a break. Like let's just go to a beach and just like chill out for 3 days,
Or a movie.
It's just exactly, because it just can be nonstop, 24/7. And there's a lot of pressure, especially since we're full time together now. There's a lot of pressure to keep it up and to make sure everything's running smoothly and
that we're
and it all
building
works.
it into something that's going to
And
last.
there's I think added pressure for y'all because so much of it is on your creative vision. It's not just that you wear clothes really well, which you do. You always have to be pushing it, I assume, to another level. So you can't just be like, oh yeah, let's just like go on the stoop and like take a few iPhone photos and we're done.
Work,
I want to talk a little bit about the process. We talked. You spoke at the conference. You were great. Everyone loved you. And part of the reason I wanted Cole on here was that like we kept on stage being like, oh, I wish Cole was here to like add some like some color to this. So like, let's talk about the photo in Paris where you're on the ground. Pretty unique shot. I haven't seen, I've consumed a lot of photography in my life, but like haven't seen something quite like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the angle, which was, fairly innovative, but you're in this, you're in this like kind of square of like the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing almost looks like you're in a frame, but the frame is buildings, and then it's all pretty amazing. So I'd like to just hear y'all's process on how you got to that photo.
Mm-hmm. That photo was kind of a grind, honestly. We were trying to shoot that outfit for a long time. We knew we wanted something cool. It was a funky suit. We knew we wanted to do it in a cool way. And we were trying like so many different things. We just couldn't get it. We knew we wanted something funky, and we wanted something to really accentuate, the legs and how wide they were and whatever. So we tried stuff for so long.
gosh,
We were
like-
trying stuff on staircases. We were trying stuff like
How
in the
do you-
ballroom. We were trying.
And how do you think about that? Okay, so you're like, you get clothes,
Mhm.
and you're like, okay, this has a big wide leg that could be kind of dramatic.
Yeah.
So how do you start? I don't think most people would even know how do you accentuate a wide leg on a suit. How do you think? Are you like, okay, I need movement. Are you
Yeah.
like, I want to shoot it from down because the leg is going to look even bigger? Like, how did you,
Right.
I think a lot, like, I mean, I will say, like, the number one thing that I do when we're shooting is, like, I am moving around. Like, it's just, like, and then all of a sudden we'll see something. Like, the first 50 shots, I'm just, like, trying weird stuff. And if there are people around, I'm always just like, here we go. Like, this is going to be the worst. But we just, like, honestly, we just try a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we'll see kind of something that's, like, almost there. And then
Yeah.
we'll work on that
Right.
thing. And like, I don't know why or how, but I think it comes from like, also me, like, I mean, I studied fashion design, and that's why I got into photography, because I liked how it made clothes come to life. So I'm always thinking like, how can you accentuate what I'm wearing, or like what's like a different, that's kind of my process, is like the person wearing the clothes.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah. So with Tessa's background in photography and fashion and posing, she's a master at doing that. So we were trying stuff. I was super low. We have this really wide angle lens, so I was getting low, and she was like lunging towards me, and it was looking really cool. And we could kind of see it was at the hotel. We were in this square, this like little middle square where they had all these chairs and tables and stuff. And so I was getting lower and lower, and finally it was to the point where we're like, let's just lay on the ground and like see if we can make something work in here.
And mind you, I was like full on like
Yeah.
lunging over, and like every time I would fall, it was right by his ear. He's like, "You almost killed me!" It was like dramatic. And some movie was being filmed around us, like, and people were like, "Who are these like freaks on the ground?" Oh man.
So finally, I just reached the point where I was just laying full on the ground, and we were like, "This looks super cool." And then Tessa was like, "What if I'm like stepping over you?"
Yeah.
And so, after like an hour and a half of trying all these different things, it finally we were able to stumble upon this really cool, crazy perspective.
Yeah. And you shot that
Yeah.
with, the 16 to 35. Was it like it was
Yeah,
at 16?
it was cranked.
Yeah.
And I will say too, like that image. I mean, this is why I tell everyone to shoot in RAW, because it was like black. Like my face was black, and I was like, I don't know. I hope this is gonna, I can bring out the shadows and post, and it'll you'll be able to understand what we're seeing. But luckily, I mean, it did. We shoot a lot like that, but I just, that's something I always emphasize, because I think some people are afraid of like learning how to like edit, and that's like a simple thing that can take your work from, one place to another. And when you're in something for so long, you don't realize how little people know.
Right. Well, it's a whole different language.
It's a whole different language.
Shooting photos and editing photos, it is a whole different, those are, and it is very much, I think, a trade.
Yeah.
It's like blacksmithing.
Yeah.
It is something that like just takes years and hundreds of thousands of photos, like that. You can't just, even if you have talent, it's not just like you're there, because you have to learn that camera. I mean, I'm sure you both now can, you see the world as a photo. You can see what the photo would look like. My like parlor trick when I used to shoot was like I could say exactly what perfect exposure was. I was like, this is 400 ISO 5.6 1/800th, and like someone would meter it and it'd be perfect.
Oh
like,
my gosh.
boom. Like because
James in the house.
I love it.
because you've taken 200,000 photos and like it's just another. It's like being fluent in another language.
Yeah.
And I think
Exactly.
that like a lot of people don't want to put the work in.
Yeah.
And you've been taking photos for how long?
10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
5 years?
Yeah, 4 or 5 years now.
Hundreds of thousands of photos, you know?
So many. Yeah.
How often do you guys switch up lenses? Because when I would get stuck in like a rut with photography, I would try and buy some new piece of equipment just because you just get bored.
Yeah.
You're like, I feel like I've taken every photo.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think we changed it. I mean, like even in the beginning, the first lens we ever shot on was like a 50 millimeter. You know, it's like that first lens, you get that blurry background. You're like, this is professional looking, and it's like so nice. And then we went to a 35, and then the 16 and 35, and like we mix it up a lot. I think buying a new lens is like just buying a new perspective, and you really have to learn how to use it, and that's why
it's a really good pull quote, by the way. Buying a new lens is buying a new perspective. It's really good.
I like it. I like it.
Another photo I want to just talk about is one that performed quite well. Was your Halloween post?
Oh yeah, we can
That
talk
big-
about that.
50,000 likes on that one, which is decent. Crazy photo.
Crazy photo, yes.
How did you? I assume that had some set building.
It had
Oh,
some,
yeah.
yeah, we can talk about that. Like
yeah.
we
We
always
should've done
want
a
to
full
do behind the scenes, but we're too busy in the thing that I'm like, by the time it's over, I'm like, oh well, no behind the scenes. Like it's too late.
Have you watched like Jamie Beck, Ann Street Studio? Do you follow?
No,
her? You need to follow her because
need to.
her like behind, like she does
Okay.
these step by steps of how she does this stuff, and I'm just like, how could you have like?
Yeah.
There's so much work.
Yeah.
You know, to like
I
go
need to
through the
go
whole
check
process.
the
So
behind the
take us through the
scenes.
process then.
Okay, Halloween day, we're like, crap, we haven't done anything. What are we gonna do? I'm like, let's just go to the like costume store, vintage store, see what we can find. We're looking around. We had many other ideas. Nothing was working. I saw some weird silver suit. I'm like, I could be some like astronaut situation. And he's like, yeah. Okay, so we started going on this tangent. He found like a patch on
Found
a
the NASA
glove.
patch.
We like cut it off and like put it on. We're like, okay, this is gonna be a costume.
Went to another Halloween store, we're digging, found this helmet, we're like, this is perfect. Got the helmet.
And we have so many string lights.
Yeah.
So I'm
Okay.
like, we'll do something. I'm like, okay, we'll just like go home and come up with something. So as we're walking home, I'm like, I just feel like we are gonna need a darker background. It's light outside right now, you know? So we went to the craft store. We bought like 2 massive black poster boards that were like taking up
I
the
saw
wall.
that of you guys walking
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
street
yeah.
with
I was
like
like, this is gonna be blurry, and we're just like hoping it's gonna work. You know, we never know. It could have been a fail, but luckily it worked. So then we got home, and then we start just taping string lights to the ceiling, so they're like all hanging, creating like these like orb type of deals.
Yeah.
And then there was still too much light coming through. I mean, we full on had our assistant like holding other boards, like trying to block light. She was like doing a workout. I'm like, this is just, if anyone could see, not as magical as it seemed. And then we did a bunch of different kinds of photos. I think like the last one was kind of the one, ended up being the one, because we kind of found like the light that actually filled the helmet. Before that, it was they looked very scary, which was cool too. But then this one kind of felt like magical.
Yeah, and we had a super low shutter speed, and we'd like move the lights so they'd be swaying, and so they'd be kind of blurred when I was focusing on Tezza's face. So it kind of created this. You couldn't really exactly tell they were string lights. You know, they were kind of
I was
and we put those closer to me, and so I kind of shot through them, so they were kind of just like blurred in the foreground a little bit. To kind of create that star feeling.
Which, you know, to those watching, again, I think that like part of this is putting the time in with the camera to know. Yeah. You know, because again, you can almost see those photos before you take them.
Yeah.
You can say, I know I can sway these photos around. I know if I put the lights close to the lens, they're going to be out of focus. They're just going to look like stars. They're not going to look like lights, and you know. So yeah, I think that like something that frustrates me sometimes is I don't think people are willing to put the work in. So how long, like on the Halloween post, how long from like leaving your apartment to be like, yep, let's go make some art, to final edited photo that you're ready to post? How long do you think that took you?
That one was probably like a 5-hour process.
Yeah, it's a
4 or 5
project.
hour process.
I mean, because I think we left at like noon.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, we're not gonna have enough time. You know, this is like.
And a lot of that too was coming up with the concept.
Yeah.
Of just like, Tezza kind of knew she wanted to be an astronaut, and then going from wanting to be an astronaut to creating this scene, took a lot of,
we were
okay,
like
how are we
3
going to make
different
this cool?
stores, you know,
Yeah.
so there was all that. And then hanging up the lights, that took like probably another hour. And then once we took the photos, we actually took them, and then I started editing, and luckily we were at our home. So I was like, okay, this is all good, but we need to take one more round because I see something here that we haven't quite gotten. So we were able to go back and do it again, and then the editing and all of that, which took obviously too long, but always I spend way too much time. But yeah, I think it took like 5 hours.
Yeah.
So it was a project.
And is that like pretty normal for y'all? Like what, you know, obviously there's some you walk out, you shoot some, you shoot something, you get it, you're like, great. You can kind of probably take one of your presets and tweak it a bit and be done.
Yeah. I think 5 hours would be a little much. But actually we do a lot of planning beforehand sometimes. And so it's quicker. Like we're like, okay, let's try. You know, if you saw our iPhone, there are things of me like laying on the ground of our apartment, like trying something. I'm like, okay, this will be cool. I'll do it on the street, but like, is this going to be cool? Is it going to be worth it? You know, like I always got to make sure it's going to be worth it because, whew, there's been some embarrassing moments for me. But we spend a lot of time. But that's what we love to do. So I think those are our best shots.
For sure.
What do you think, you know, for y'all and then for the industry, like what's next? How much further can you take what you're doing? You know, how much crazier can it get? Do you feel like it needs to get crazier and crazier and more editorial and more out of this world? And like, where does it go next, do you think? What do you know?
I mean, one thing that is hard is, and I think the most stressful part of what we do is that we are constantly having to one-up ourselves. And it's like, oh man, like I'm like, and that almost stops us sometimes from creating anything. Because I'm just like, I can't think of anything, so there's just too much pressure, and then I feel like anxiety and we go out to shoot, and then it ends up having just bad vibes. So that's the hardest part, I think, but you know, we have a lot of other plans for how to build and grow what we're doing into kind of more of an actual brand. I'll let you speak to that because you're better at speaking.
But I mean, a lot of it is just extending so much of what we've already done, and this concept of the art of life, which is kind of the motto of Tezza as a brand or a world, of just, I think, you know, we live in a tiny little box apartment, but we've tried to tweak it to make it a beautiful space that you want to be in. With the collage kit and you know, the app being able to edit your photos in a beautiful way and create a cohesive aesthetic. And so trying to create these tools or this world where you feel like you're kind of creating your own life or turning your life into an artwork. So much of like our future products and things that we want to build is this world where you want to dip into and create, and you're inspired and you get that same like creative fulfillment. And so like collage kit, the app, presets, book kind of all fit in that world. And so we're trying to, you know, move on to the next, which could very well be fashion or more home goods products or other creative tools, and just continue to extend that is really, I think, the future of where we want to go.
You must get questions all the time from people, you know, asking advice. What do you think? If you were to pinpoint why you think y'all are successful, and I think you're at a place now where you can be like, yeah, like you've done something special here. Like, what is it? Is it just that you're more talented than other people? Is it, you know, that you worked harder? What's the thing that you think, if you try and attribute your success to?
I remember somebody once said something to me. They said, you know, I was like always kind of doing this, but I felt like I didn't really have a voice. And they said, you know, well, what do your friends ask you advice on? Like, what are you good at? And I was like, oh, okay. And so I kind of turned that into my brand. And I think sometimes they're like, people are trying to do what other people are doing or whatever, but everyone has like something they're actually good at. And if you just like capitalize on that, then it will kind of carry you. I think that's the best advice I ever got, because I was, at that time, I was trying to like fit all these other molds, and it just wasn't working for me. Like, and so I think that's kind of where we found success, and I think that's, that would be like my number one advice. I had another thought and it left me.
You know, it's an interesting point, because I think that like people say like, when should I start charging? and we're usually like when people start wanting to pay you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and when do I know if I should start a blog? When people are coming to you being like, asking you advice about like,
Right.
you know, where do you get your clothes? How do you do this? How do you do your makeup? How do you do your hair? Like,
Right.
if people are asking you those questions, it's probably a pretty good indication that like you have a unique thing that people want.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that like what is forgotten in the influencer world often is that to influence people, you have to be in some way better than them at something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like
I mean, it could be anything. Like,
You
I
know.
mean, that's the one thing I've also, like, there's so many people that have like a crazy, unique following, and that sometimes is better than having a massive amount of followers that are just like following you because you're whatever. But if you're specifically good at something, or you have this one thing that makes you you, like, then that's what you should focus on.
Yeah.
And the rest will, like, there's always things that are going to add to it, but that's like a great way to.
And I think for you being interested in photography, again, it is a industry and a passion that you know it's a decades long road. It is not a quick, you know, you can't get a camera and be a great photographer in 6 months.
Yeah.
You can't be a great photographer in 6 years usually. And the best people are always learning. So I think that like it teaches you, the camera teaches you patience in a way that some things don't. Cole, what about what do you think, if you were to kind of pin your success, y'all's success on something, what is it? Is that she felt like she had a voice that people wanted to hear. You know, your involvement in this business, that's not the impetus for it, right? Like it wasn't initially your voice.
Right.
So
well, I do think one reason that we've found a lot of success, when we really started growing and there was all this momentum around what we were doing, was when we really got into our community, and when we started engaging with people and asking them to share like hashtag Tezza Home or Tezza App or Tezza Presets or whatever they were doing, whatever they were interested in, what we were doing, and getting them to reshare it and creating this community. And it created this just like this world, this conversation around how to edit photos or take photos, and people were asking each other questions and asking us questions, and it took on this life of its own. And I think that has created so much momentum and success for us, you know, that we didn't really anticipate. You know, we wanted to see how people use the presets or use the app or set up their collage kit, and then it just created this like life of its own. And it's just
point.
like paid off dividends, and people have been, you know, coming back to us or hearing about us through all these different avenues that we never expected in a million years.
yeah,
So
I'm ready for like TezzaCon.
yeah.
Well, we are working on an experience.
Interested to hear, you know, what a quote unquote normal day. There's no normal days really, but what a normal day looks like. Because what is interesting is that creating the level of imagery that you do, you have to leave time for that creativity. In New York City, you can fill every day, 12 hours a day. You can fill it to the brim, and, you know, with meetings and events and all of that. So what do y'all's days look like, and do you have to be disciplined about leaving time for, you know, those happy accidents and those moments of creativity?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we spend no two days are the same, and like ever since we started doing more on our own, I mean, I spend so much time going to events and all of that, and it takes up so much more time than we ever want. So, you know, it takes a lot of sacrifice. Like, I think we wake up a lot of early mornings to shoot, because that's like the best time when no one's around, but like we also are kind of like at a peace of mind to have time to create, because when we're in a time crunch, I think we get too stressed and then we end up wasting time. So it is about like that balance. You know, and then we also are like working on products all the time. I think that like probably more than you see on the outside, like that takes up so much time on our end. I mean, we package the collage kits, we ship them out. It's like all in-house. So it's a weird balance. I think luckily, like, you know, because he shoots it, I'm like, okay, I try and get 50% of the way, and then I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. I've come up with the outfit and whatever, but like, what's our concept here? And then we'll have to like go out and get it done. you know, to find time to do it. But
yeah, and like Tessa said, no 2 days are exactly the same. We do a lot of shoot planning at night because, you know, Tessa's back from events, I'm done working on the app or packaging of collage kits or whatever. We can just kind of like hunker down after dinner and just like spend an hour or two and just kind of talk about what we want to do, gather some inspiration, talk about outfits and what we want to do for the next day or the next week. And then a lot of days, you know, we spend like the first hour of the morning kind of prioritizing, like, look, I need the first half of the day is like app time. Like, you go to these meetings, we'll come back in the afternoon and we'll plan the shoot that we're going to do this evening. So yeah, a
like
lot of
back
it's
in the day, we used to shoot every day.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and we try to front load a lot of our content on the weekends, because weekends we usually have a little more time to be like, okay, we're gonna go venture out to Central Park and to Brooklyn and to like try all these different locations that aren't kind of in our general vicinity and like try some really cool stuff. So a lot of the week we'll try and get some good shots, and if we need to, you know, we'll plan something that happens midweek. But if we can, we like to gather a lot of inspiration during the week and kind of think, okay, how are we gonna like kill it this weekend and get like 3 or 4 or 5 really great photos that we can use at other times. Just because the weeks get so crazy busy, like you said, in New York City, it's like you could go to 10 meetings a day, you know.
Are you having to get better at saying no? Do you find yourself saying no a lot more? I mean, I think you move to the city, you start doing this, you just want to do everything. You
And
know?
you get like FOMO.
Yeah.
It's weird, you're like, oh my gosh, all my friends went to this event and I didn't go, but like I couldn't go, I'm too stressed. And then you like have to travel for a job and you miss it. You know, there's constantly this like game of like feeling like you're keeping up with everybody else, which is good and bad. But I think it's also to remember, like good to remember, there are so many successful people in this industry that don't live in a big city. So sometimes I'm like, it's all good. Like the world's gonna go on if I can't like make it to everything. You know? So.
But are you guys saying no more? Are you just being like, I'm so sorry, like that event sounds awesome, but I just can't. I can't come.
And I think it's important too. Like, I mean, when you get to a certain point, and we're finally, I think, getting to this point, we have an awesome assistant, and she's super helpful. And like, if it's an event I can't go to, I'm like, hey, maybe you could stop by and like say hi to the brand, and like, you know, you work for our team, and so like, that's something that's I think been useful as of late, like a better way to manage getting around. But saying no is the hardest part. Still working on it.
And just my last question here is just travel. You know, a lot of influencers get to a certain point and essentially want to spend their whole lives traveling. It would be very difficult to do what you did with the app, with the presets, with the collage kit, with all of those things, and shooting super editorial imagery and doing all of this if you were traveling constantly. What is y'all's kind of philosophy towards travel, and kind of how do you plan that out while running multiple businesses?
It's the hardest part. I mean, because we love to travel, because being in a new space, you know, for photos is just like so refreshing. But it is so hard to work on our other projects while we travel. So it's really, we're still trying to find that balance. I think every day we're like offered a really cool trip and we're like, sounds cool, but is that going to benefit the long run? I know. I think now everything we say yes to, we're like, what's the bigger picture of that? Does it add? And if it doesn't, then we're like, okay, we're just going to have to say no. You know?
Exactly.
And that's kind of our mindset on that.
Because there have been some trips that have seemed really cool, and then you go and you're like, oh, but I got to do this, this, and this, and like we're behind on this app update, and then halfway through the trip, you're not even having fun. You're just like stressed. So like Tessa said, it's just finding out what trips are valuable and what trips will really contribute to the overall vision, and like saying yes to those. And then trying to have some sort of like regular schedule when you're on a trip. You know, we still try and like, okay, we gotta like, let's take this morning and do emails and like make sure everything's good on the collage kit front, they're being shipped out, and trying to like maintain some type of like normalcy. Otherwise it can just get crazy.
It sounds like you guys
out of the loop.
Also need some more help. You know, you guys can apply at jobs@buytezza.com.
Yes, we're hiring. Come on up. Well, we just are moving finally out of our box.
So
like it's been like no one can come over. It's like you're walking into a walk-in closet. It's very shocking. But so.
Well, thank you guys so much. We're gonna go have a chic dinner at Lucienne.